What's up, guys? I'm reading in Joshua chapter 4 today. This is the section on the memorial stones when Joshua leads the people of Israel across the Jordan. And right now I'm just kind of looking at verse 5 first, and it just says, Joshua said to them, "Cross over before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and each one of you take up a stone on his shoulder according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign among you when your children ask in time to come, saying, 'What do these stones mean to you?' Then you shall answer them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. And these stones shall be for a memorial to the children of Israel forever." And this was specifically God's word to Joshua as they were preparing to cross the Jordan. And it's interesting how God had asked Joshua to lead the people in doing something that would speak in remembrance of the goodness of God. So not only does he want us to remember him, but he wants us to almost put these things in place in our lives to remember him. So for me personally, like, journaling is something that I do that helps me to reflect on and remember, what God has done in my life, the goodness of God, and all of those different things that he's poured out into me that I may not even recognize until I sit down to reflect and write on them. And I think that's exactly what he's saying to Joshua in this text as well. He's saying, like, if you don't do this, you won't remember that I provided. If you don't write this down, if you don't lay these stones on the other side of the Jordan, if you don't build this memorial to me, you won't remember that I've been good to you. So I need you to do this to remember me, to remember that I am faithful, to remember in your own life what those situations are that I've poured out into. So something that speaks to the remembrance of God's goodness and of his faithfulness and pouring out is something that we have to take upon ourselves as a responsibility in God's word to make it intentional in our remembrance, like being disciplined in the way that we remember God and remember the goodness that he's poured out into our lives. So like I said, for me, it's journaling, and that may not be the same thing for you, but reflecting on my day helps me to see all of the different ways that God poured out and spoke and brought life into my life, honestly, in all of those different ways that he was present, even when I may not have felt it or seen it. But when you sit down to write it and reflect, you can visibly and tangibly see the evidence of God working in your life. So for me, it's journaling. For what he spoke to Joshua, it was laying those stones on the other side of the Jordan. And I love how it kind of says, like, towards the end of this chapter 2, in verse 21, it says, "Then he spoke to the children of Israel, saying, 'When your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, What are these stones? Then you shall let your children know, saying, Israel crossed over this Jordan on dry land. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up before us until we had crossed over, that all the peoples of the earth may know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever.'" And I just want to ask, where in your life have you set up a memorial to the goodness of God? What part of your life has God gotten you through? Where has he brought you across the Jordan on dry land? Where has he brought you across the Red Sea on dry land that you may need to write down, that you may need to reflect upon, that you may need to hang a picture on your wall to remind you of where he's gotten you from? Because it's not just for you. It's not just a memory for you to hang on to say, "Oh, that was nice when God did this." But what he says, when your children ask you, when they ask you, how did God work in your life? When they ask you, how did God make this relationship possible for you? When they ask you, how did this marriage work, in the midst of everything going on in the world at this time? Like, how did this work? You need to be able to answer them and say, this is exactly how God poured out, because it's a testimony. And it speaks to the power of how God has moved in your life, and that testimony has power speaking into their life, and it's going to be setting an example and setting a remembrance of God's goodness. And that is important, because he says it's not just for you and it's not just for them, but it says that all the peoples of the earth may know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever. It's not just for you. Remembering his goodness and reflecting upon what he's done in your life is not just for you, but it's for your children, it's for their children. And there's a reason that he gave these stories to Israel to hand down through generations, because he said, I've done these great works and I want you to remember it, because I want you to know that you can trust me. I want you to know that you can believe in my faithfulness and my character, and that's why I need you to be intentional about remembering these things, about putting up these memorials in your life that speak to what I've done, what I've brought you through. So I'd encourage you to look in your life right now, and whatever it is, whatever situation, circumstance, whether it's going through quarantine, whether it's like getting through a difficult relationship, whether it's being restored in a difficult relationship, whether it's getting a job or losing a job, or carrying you through all those different aspects in your life, whether it's anxiety, depression, addiction, whatever it is, there's something that God brought you through specifically that he says today, remember that I brought you through this. I want you to build a memorial in your life somewhere, and I want you to place it on the other side of where I brought you from. And so I just want to encourage us to look back and to reflect in our lives, and whether we do that through journaling, through prayer, through conversation, however we can do it, let's look for that place where we can build a memorial to the goodness of God, because he wants us to remember that he is faithful, that we can trust him, that he is good, and to know that he's working in our lives, not only yesterday, but today and forever. So I just encourage us to do that, guys. God bless you. Have an awesome weekend.